Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The chandelier above the dining table sparkled, so brightly it almost mocked her. This was supposed to look like a family gathering, but Aurora Miles knew better. It felt like a trap. Every seat at the long polished table was taken. At the head, her father, Malcolm, sat in his dark tailored suit, smiling like a king about to deliver a royal decree. Her uncle Preston leaned back with his arms crossed, blocking half the room with his bulk, while Aunt Miriam stirred her tea without drinking it, eyes darting toward Aurora like a hawk waiting for a slip. Even her cousin Lila avoided her gaze, pretending to be fascinated by the pattern on the tablecloth. Aurora stepped inside slowly, bag slung over one shoulder, hair tied back neatly, her face calm. She had practiced that calm all night. "Aurora!" Malcolm said with false warmth as he stood, arms opening wide. "We're so glad you could make it." His voice had that performative charm that sounded good at charity dinners, but felt like ice in this room. She knew what was coming. She always knew when her father was about to take something from her. The first thing Aurora saw was the table itself. 3 leather-bound folders sat in the center, one already open. Its contents fanned out like a dealer's cards. Legal papers, transfer forms, clauses highlighted in yellow. Everything designed to look official and civilized. But Aurora saw it for what it was, a plan to strip her of the one thing her mother had fought to leave behind. $2.4 million, locked in a trust, money meant to build her future, and they wanted to manage it for her. "We just want what's fair," Malcolm said smoothly, sliding the open folder closer to where she now stood. "You're young, sweetheart. You don't need this kind of burden. Let us take care of it for you." Aurora pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, her heart steady. "Manage it," she repeated quietly. "That's what you call it." Preston shifted, his voice deep. "We're only protecting what your mother wanted for the whole family." Aurora let out a small laugh, not bitter, but sharp enough to make her cousin flinch. Malcolm gestured toward the far corner, where 2 men in expensive suits stood silent, their hands clasped in front of them. Lawyers, paid to look serious and intimidating. "The paperwork is ready," Malcolm said. "All that's missing is your signature." Aurora took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch until the ticking of the grandfather clock filled the room. Then she smiled, soft and deliberate. "Interesting," she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out her phone. "Because I brought someone too." The shift in the room was immediate. Preston straightened in his seat. Miriam's spoon clinked against a teacup, and Malcolm's smile froze. "Brought someone?" he asked slowly. The sound of heels clicking against marble echoed from the hallway before anyone could speak again. A woman dressed in a sleek black suit stepped into the room, her presence like a cold gust of wind cutting through the false warmth. Her dark hair was pinned back, her eyes sharp as polished glass, and in her hand she carried a heavy briefcase. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority that didn't need to be raised. "My name is Celeste Vaughn. I represent Miss Miles." Malcolm's face twitched. "You brought a lawyer?" Celeste set the briefcase on the table with a solid, echoing thud. "Not just a lawyer," she replied evenly. "I am also the executor of her mother's original will, the one your attorneys seem to have overlooked." She opened the case and pulled out a binder, so thick it made the table groan slightly. "This document states clearly that Miss Miles retains full control of her inheritance and is legally shielded from any family coercion." Lila's head shot up, her eyes wide. Preston muttered something under his breath, but Celeste ignored him. Aurora leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, her voice cool. "You didn't invite me to dinner. You invited me to a robbery." The only thing you didn't expect was that I'd show up with my own security." Malcolm laughed, the sound forced. "Aurora, sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. We were just trying to help." Celeste slid a notarized page across the table toward him, her tone cutting through his charm like glass. "Correction," she said. "Your late wife knew exactly what she was doing, and she made sure your hands would never touch a cent of this money." Malcolm's expression cracked, panic flickering beneath the layers of control. He reached for the document, but Celeste covered it with her hand. "You are not named anywhere," she said coldly, "and this clause right here states that any attempt to pressure Miss Miles will disqualify you from future estate funds." The silence that followed was so thick Aurora could hear her own breathing. Malcolm's composure slipped, just for a moment, before he forced another smile, this one more brittle than the first. "Aurora," he said, voice lower now, almost pleading, "you don't understand what this kind of money can do for us, what it can do for the family. Your mother would have wanted." Aurora cut him off before he could finish. "Don't," she said, her voice firm but not loud. "Don't use her name to justify what you're doing." Her aunt finally set the spoon down with a sharp clink. "You're tearing this family apart," Miriam said, her voice shaking. Aurora stood, her chair scraping against the floor as she pushed it back. "No," she said evenly. "You tore it apart when you mocked my mother while she was sick. You tore it apart when you left me alone to pay hospital bills with her insurance money. You tore it apart every time you called her a gold digger behind her back. I'm just refusing to keep patching the cracks you made." Celeste packed the binder back into her case, standing as well. "We're done here," she said simply. The two lawyers in the corner shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Aurora walked out with Celeste beside her, their heels striking the marble like a drumbeat. Every step felt like a small victory, the sound echoing down the hallway as if the house itself was bearing witness. No shouting followed, no slamming doors, just silence, so heavy it almost pressed on her back. When the front door shut behind her, it sounded like more than would meeting would. It sounded final, but they didn't stay quiet for long. By the time Aurora got home, her phone was lit up with messages, missed calls from Malcolm, long texts from Miriam, short frantic ones from Lila. Even Preston sent one that just said, "Don't do this." Aurora dropped the phone on the table and let it buzz until it went still. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the quiet, letting the adrenaline drain out of her body. For the first time in years, she wasn't just reacting. She was choosing. She opened her laptop, created a new email, and BCC'd every name that had been at that table. Her fingers didn't tremble as she typed. Subject: Inheritance misconduct. Final statement. "Dear family," she wrote, "I am no longer available for manipulation. If you attempt to contact me regarding my trust, you will hear from my lawyer, not me. You are not entitled to what my mother entrusted to me. If you thought my silence meant agreement, consider this your correction. We are not at war, but we are no longer in business." She hit send, closed the laptop, and felt something shift, not just in her, but in the air, in the bones of the house, in the story of her family. For generations, women like her mother had been told to hand over what was theirs, to stay quiet, to keep the peace even as they bled for it. Aurora had just broken that chain. 3 weeks later, the knock on her door came just as she was leaving for work. The courier handed her a thick envelope, certified and stamped, heavy enough to feel like bad news. Inside was a legal petition with her father's name at the top and Preston's signature below. They were seeking redistribution of the inheritance based on family contribution and verbal agreement with the deceased. Aurora laughed out loud, the sound startling even herself. Verbal agreement, no proof, no documents, just desperation dressed up in legal language. Celeste called her before she could even finish reading. "We expected this," Celeste said calmly. "They really think a court will honor hearsay over a notarized will. Good. Let them try." Aurora's smile was sharp. "Let's respond quickly," she said. They drafted the reply that afternoon, attaching bank statements, email records, and most importantly, the letter her mother had written 6 months before she died. "Don't let them take this from you," it said. "You earned it by staying when they left. This is not a gift. It is what's owed." The hearing date came faster than Aurora expected. The courtroom smelled of varnish and quiet judgment. Malcolm arrived flanked by 3 lawyers, each with briefcases, crisp suits, and expressions that tried to look confident. Aurora entered with Celeste and a calm she hadn't felt in years. She wore her mother's favorite navy coat and the silver ring her mother had given her on her 21st birthday. When the judge took her seat, the air in the room shifted. Malcolm's attorney launched into arguments about fairness, family legacy, and verbal promises, but every sentence sounded thinner than the one before it. Celeste waited until they were finished, then stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't rush. She simply placed the original will on the table, along with Aurora's mother's letter, copies of every legal filing and the trust's audit trail. "Your Honor," Celeste said, "this case is not about fairness. It is about the rule of law and the intent of the deceased, which is clear, witnessed, and legally protected." The judge nodded once, expression unreadable. The decision took less than an hour. "There is no evidence to support the petitioner's claims," the judge said flatly. "The court recognizes the validity of the original will. The motion is denied." Malcolm's shoulders sank, his jaw tight as if the words physically weighed him down. Preston muttered something under his breath, and Miriam turned her face away. Aurora didn't move. She simply breathed, slow and deep, feeling the years of silence break apart like glass around her. Celeste gathered the documents, handed Aurora the final copy, and smiled. "This wasn't just a win," she said quietly. "This was a line drawn in stone. They know now. You're not a girl they can corner anymore." Aurora nodded, her throat tight. As they walked out of the courthouse, the winter sun felt warmer than it should have. That night, Aurora unlocked her mother's safety deposit box for the first time since the funeral. Inside was a folder, a flash drive labeled Truth, and a small velvet pouch. The folder contained letters, one for each member of the family, written in her mother's clear, elegant handwriting. Each letter listed dates, incidents, quiet betrayals Aurora barely remembered, but her mother had recorded. At the bottom, her mother's letter to her. "Don't fight with noise," it said. "Win with light. Let the truth be your sword, not your shield. You were never meant to hide behind anything." Aurora's hand shook as she opened the velvet pouch and found her mother's victory ring, the one she wore after winning her first court case years ago. Aurora slipped it on, and it fit perfectly as if waiting for this exact day. A week later, Malcolm tried to rewrite history. Aurora saw the headline while drinking her morning coffee. Local entrepreneur Malcolm Miles launches initiative honoring late wife's legacy. Her mother's name, printed across a website she never approved, plastered next to Malcolm's smiling face and donation boxes. Aurora didn't throw the mug. She didn't cry. She simply called Celeste. "File an injunction," she said, "today, and trademark her name if we have to." Within days, the website vanished, the donors backed out, and Malcolm called, leaving one last voicemail. "Maybe we can start over. Do something together in her memory." Aurora saved the message, not for court, but as a reminder. Then she did what would haunt him forever. She launched the Miles Truth Foundation, a program funding scholarships for girls taught to stay small. She printed her mother's signature on every banner, every letterhead, every award. When Aurora cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony, she didn't think of revenge. She thought of peace. "They wanted me to give it all away," she whispered as the crowd applauded. "But this is what giving really looks like." And for the first time, she felt her mother everywhere, alive not in memory, but in motion, in legacy, in the lives that would be changed because she refused to be silenced. Aurora's foundation didn't stay small for long. The first month, there were just a handful of applications from women who'd heard whispers of the courtroom victory. By the second month, there were dozens. women who had been cut out of family businesses, daughters pressured to do the right thing and give up their inheritance to brothers who had never shown up, widows fighting relatives over pensions. Aurora read every story late into the night, sometimes with tears streaming down her face, sometimes with a quiet smile because she could feel her mother in every word. "You've started something," Celeste told her over lunch one afternoon. "Something bigger than this case." Aurora nodded. "It's not just about the money," she said. "It's about giving women permission to stop apologizing for surviving." Celeste smiled at that. "Then keep going," she said, "because this is exactly the kind of storm they don't know how to weather." The family didn't stay silent. Of course they didn't. When power is all someone knows, they treat boundaries like betrayal. Malcolm called twice more, then sent an email titled, "Let's be civil." Preston sent a letter through his lawyer asking for a private family sit-down. Miriam posted a vague status on social media, "Money changes people." Aurora didn't respond to any of it. She didn't post back, didn't send a reply, didn't even unblock their numbers. Silence wasn't her shield anymore, it was her strategy. And silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. She poured her focus into the foundation, into the women who needed her, into the work that made her mother's name shine in the light instead of being buried under lawsuits. Each time the foundation published a new newsletter or funded another scholarship, Aurora imagined her mother's smile. It became her favorite form of revenge, not the burning, bitter kind, but the kind that built something strong enough to outlive every attempt they made to erase her. Months passed, and the foundation held its first live summit. Daughters of the Line. 100 women filled the grand hall, their voices buzzing with excitement, their stories written on their faces like a secret language only they could read. Aurora stood backstage, her mother's victory ring glinting under the stage lights, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the room fell into a hush. "They told us we were selfish," Aurora began, her voice steady. "They told us to smile, to give, to stay small. But tonight we are not small." The applause that followed felt like thunder breaking a long drought. Women cried. Some just closed their eyes, breathing deeply as if filling their lungs for the first time in years. Aurora spoke about truth, about boundaries, about her mother's courage. And when she ended with her mother's words, "Win with light, not noise," the room rose to its feet. That night, after the summit, Aurora returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return address, just her name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper with 5 words, "Mom would be proud." It was signed by Lila. No threats, no manipulation, no plea, just the words. Aurora sat on the floor and read it 3 times. It didn't feel like an ambush. It felt like truth. Maybe, just maybe, there were still cracks where light could get through. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The letter went into the same box as her mother's, tucked between the velvet pouch and the flash drive labeled truth. Weeks later, Aurora stood outside a field of tall grass as the late afternoon sun poured gold across everything it touched. Before her stood a renovated courthouse, its white columns gleaming, the plaque at its base reading, "The Eleanor Miles House, a sanctuary for daughters who chose themselves." Beneath it, etched in smaller letters, were her mother's words, "They'll call you selfish for saving yourself. Let them. Walk anyway." Aurora gripped the scissors in her hand, the same ones her mother had used to open her first business, and cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause, not polite clapping, but the kind that felt like a heartbeat, steady and alive. Celeste stood beside her, smiling softly. "You know this will outlive them all," she whispered. Aurora smiled back. "That's the point," she said. "I never wanted revenge. I just wanted a legacy they couldn't touch." As the guests filtered into the building, Aurora walked through the halls, slowly, taking it all in. Legal aid rooms painted in soft green, therapy rooms in warm gold, walls lined with quotes from women, who had walked away from silence. She passed a teenager scribbling a poem with a pink pen, a mother holding her daughter's hand, a woman reviewing a lease she had finally gotten approved. The air was filled with quiet conversation, laughter, the sound of possibility. Aurora paused beneath the archway at the center of the hall and felt something deep in her chest loosen, as though every version of herself that once begged for love in rooms designed to drain her had finally been released. When she stepped outside, the sunset was painting the sky in shades of fire and honey. Aurora stood in the grass, wind brushing her hair back, and whispered softly, "They thought the inheritance was the treasure, but it was never about the money. It was about me." She didn't feel rage anymore. She didn't hunger for their apologies. What she felt was completion. She no longer needed their table because she had built her own kingdom, and every woman who walked through those sanctuary doors was heir to something priceless. Aurora slipped her hands into her coat pockets and smiled, not for them, not even for her mother, but for herself, because she was no longer her mother's shadow. She was her mother's voice, her mother's proof that love and truth can outlast greed. And somewhere deep down, she knew, the dynasty they tried to build on her silence had already fallen. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.